Welcome to a special edition of Red Tinted Glasses, or should we say for this episode, Tartan Tinted Glasses. Tonight, we are looking forward to the big playoff final against Serbia, Scotland-Serbia, Thursday, probably by the time you're all listening to this. Joining me and Callum tonight is Fraser Wallace. Fraser, welcome to the podcast.
Pleasure to be here, guys. Thank you for having me.
No problem. After us not managing to fit your novel-length amount of stories onto our stories podcast, which you can all listen to and watch back on, then we decided that what better way to utilise you by getting you on for a Scotland episode, since you love the national team just as much as you love the Dons, if not more.
Yeah, I don't know why that happened. Definitely wasn't my parents' influence anyway.
So, as the nation builds with excitement and hope of reaching the first major tournament since France 1998, Callum, you excited? Nervous?
Very, very nervous about playing Serbia. Yeah, I'm excited at the prospect of possibly being at the Euros, but about the actual game, I'm absolutely cacking my pants.
Yeah,
it's not going to go well.
The semi-final against Israel, I was an absolute nervous wreck throughout. I was behind the cushion at the penalty shootout. Oh, Fraser, how do you think your nerves will hold up for Thursday night's game?
Not very well. I'm like Callum. I'm absolutely bricking it already, and at time of recording, there's still a week in the day to go. So yeah, thank goodness for Friday's Dons game.
Yeah, well, once that's out the way, then it'll certainly be full focus ahead to the Scotland game. And for those of us passionate about the national side as well, it's certainly one that we're all eagerly anticipating, but also there is that fear that comes with it as well. So let's have a look at the game in general, but let's also look at the squad and Steve Clarke. We're going into the game a year unbeaten. Callum, we'll start with you. How would you assess Steve Clarke's job and what he's done with the squad so far? He didn't really start with the greatest of results, but now we're a year unbeaten.
I'm quite happy with, the way he's got us playing isn't the most exciting football, but it's getting results. And for years we've played, some better stuff, but in the long run, it's got us absolutely nowhere. Never been at a tournament in my lifetime. I'm not sure about you two. I know you're a bit older than me, but even then, I don't think it might be your time. It's just, I'm happy that we've got someone in who can just get results out of the team, because obviously Northern Ireland has been to tournaments and they didn't get to the tournament playing sort of free flowing stuff. They got there, and the most important thing was that they were actually there. They were taking part, and we haven't even been doing that. So I'm happy with Steve Clarke. Quite happy to come and ruin everyone's day, spoil them by playing absolutely awful stuff and coming out with a result. So hopefully we can carry on that.
Yeah, and Fraser, I think that's kind of the sort of sentiment you would echo in speaking to you normally at full time in Scotland games. You don't care our style of play too much as long as we get the result. And I think, Steve Clarke, I think Callum touches on it well. It's not been an exciting style of play, but it's certainly a style that's now we're seeing the reward in terms of results.
Yeah, I think there's two factors to take on. One that is that the style of play is brutal, absolutely brutal. That Israel game is 120 minutes that none of us will ever get back. But who cares? We got through. Yeah. I think on reflection, lockdown came at a perfect time, just before the March games. I feel that we wouldn't have been able to play the three at the back in those playoffs had they been in March. And I think the chance to bed those in the September Nations League games, which again, the performances weren't great, it gave us that opportunity to sort of settle that in, let McTominay make his big mistakes. But it paid off handsomely last month with two very good wins in the Nations League. And yeah, okay, it was scraped by Israel, but if you look at the difference from the Nations League game in September to the game in October there, we conceded much less chances. So it came at a positive time. I think Steve Clarke's done the right thing by making us tighter and a bit more boring and harder to beat. But if you look at nations are similar to us, if you look at the way Ireland absolutely pooped their way to Euro 16 out of the group that we were in with them, I think they got there, I think it was 5 goals they conceded. 2 of which were to us. So in international football, it is all about keeping the ball out of our net and nicking a goal at the other end. And that is often why it's a bit boring for people compared to the club game. But if we bore our way at the Euros, who cares? I can barely remember 1998. I think I remember Collins' penalty, and I think I remember my dad swearing at Jim Leighton when he conceded the third against Morocco. And that was when I was 6 years old. So I'm now 28. So I think it shows what a long time it's been. And Callum wasn't even born, which is a bit frightening.
Yeah, I think that statement from you, Callum, frightens me the most, that you weren't even born the last time we were at a tournament. And I was the same as you, Fraser, although I was not yet 6, but near enough during that World Cup. But
I think
my memories of it are very, very few and far between.
I think the stats for us, Glenn, are 2 Euros and 1 World Cup in our lifetimes. Well, it depends when you were born in 1992, of course, but all before
July for me.
July. Well, you wouldn't have even seen that one, so you've had 1 Euros and 1 World Cup in your lifetime. 2 Euros and 1 World Cup in my lifetime, all before the age of 6.5. So yeah, fantastic stuff. Go Scotland.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, this next week, we've got something more positive to look for. It's not been a great year for many of us, and this would certainly, that seems to be the sentiment coming out of the squad. They want to give the nation something to cheer. Okay, the performances aren't always worth cheering, but hey, the results are certainly uplifting, that's for sure. Do you think, though, Callum, in terms of results, obviously that's kind of helping our seeding a little bit, but it's instilling a bit more confidence with the Tartan Army? Okay, the fans can't yet return, but if the results keep going on this upward trend, do you think that will see a return of fans to Hampden?
I think so. I definitely hope so. I basically had been to games at Pataudry until I went to the game against Russia, which we ended up losing. But we had tickets for the game against Israel, the playoff game. I think there was sort of an idea where we were all going to start going down a bit more, me and my mates. I think there is sort of a better feel about it now. Just amongst getting like us youngsters involved as well. A lot of people, especially, just aren't really that bothered because it's been so long about since then they were at a tournament. So I think it would just give a bit of buzz about things, and just the fact we're actually winning games. Okay, it's not any decent stuff. It's actually a good bit of confidence about it, and I'm actually looking forward to it. I'm nervous, but I'm looking forward to things, which is a bit of a weird situation to be in.
Yeah, although Fraser, I suppose the week of football is not really something many fans are fans of, to be fair, and I think that's kind of affected crowds in the past. But do you think a return to a more consistent Scotland side would see fans return regardless of the week of football?
Up to a point, yes. I still think that Malt at home on a Monday night would be a very difficult ask, but certainly it should see crowds return to a slightly higher level than they have been. Yeah, results are all important for the fans, but the week of football is absolutely mince if you want to go to the games. If you're a spectator and you want to watch a week of international football, it is fantastic. But if you want to sit on your TV, but it is what it is. You've just got to get on with it. And I think results would improve the crowds no end. So 100% agree with you there, Glenn.
Yeah, well, hopefully one big result on Thursday would certainly improve crowds and certainly a demand for tickets among many a Scotland fan. I don't know about you, Fraser, but I certainly haven't applied for tickets for the finals. I'm not counting my chickens yet. I'll just wait to see what happens. But I know there are people out there that have bargained on getting tickets for Hampden, as that's where our group games, if we are to qualify, will be played.
Just wait till those Hampden tickets are eligible for Volgograd.
So Thursday sees us travel to Belgrade to take on Serbia, a Serbia side that haven't been in the best form at home. They've only won one of their last 4 home games, that being a 3-2 win against Luxembourg in November of last year. And since that victory against Luxembourg, their only victory in international football has actually come in that semi-final, which many predicted Norway to come through. Callum, do you think, given Serbia's kind of recent poor form, gives us a glimmer of hope?
I think it does give us a glimmer of hope, but also, then I'm thinking about looking at their squad. They've still got match winners in there that could pop up, as we saw against Norway, like guys like Sergei Milinkovic, Savic, where we just don't have anyone on that sort of level, I don't think. And I think I did well to say his name correctly. But I think maybe we might benefit as well without them having like a capacity crowds. Obviously, Eastern European crowds known for being very intimidating for away sides, so that might hopefully play in our favour, but I could be clutching at straws there a bit. I probably am, let's be honest.
Yeah, I don't know if I saw in obviously like the Bosnia Northern Ireland game, there was a few thousand allowed in, so I'm not sure, but you're certainly right, it won't be at capacity, and again, you're right there saying it can be quite an intimidating atmosphere. You look at the Belgrade sides in European football, I remember watching them last season against like Liverpool and the atmosphere that's created there, so hopefully, but Fraser, given our recent style of football and Serbia's poor home form, do you think that's maybe something that will suit us? We could just sit in and use the likes of Ryan Fraser to kind of hit on the counter-attack?
I think so. It's amazing, actually. I took a look through their form last night, and the way their form fell off a cliff at home from the start of 2019 till now has been quite remarkable. In 6 games at home, they've won twice, which was Luxembourg, obviously, and the other one was Lithuania. So their home form is certainly patchy. I think I read somewhere as well that there won't be a crowd allowed in this for the game on next Thursday, which is absolutely superbly positive given our pathetic record anywhere east of sort of San Marino. So that'll be helpful. In terms of our style of play, I think it suits us, to be honest, playing away from home. I think it suits us playing at home as well, that we just concede possession and try and hit in the counter-attack. Serbia will have a lot of the ball, but that is where, that's where we've been pretty good. We've dropped off, we've made ourselves compact, we've denied space, and players like Tadic and Milinkovic, Savic and Juricic, although he's COVID positive, of course, and Mitrovic, they all thrive on space and running at teams and getting balls in and going attacking them. So I think us lying a bit deeper under Clarke, being more compact, absolutely benefits us. So it's as good a chance as we're ever going to get. The slight fear is you take one look at the Serbia squad list and you go, oh, they're actually quite a bit decent. But then you take a look at our squad list and compared to 3-4 years ago, we do have players in good places. You've got Tierney, Fraser, Christie's performing well in Scotland, McGinn, obviously, McTominay. You wouldn't have that, and even Lyndon Dykes has gone down and done pretty well at QPR. So there are positives to take. I think the style of play should suit us away from home, but let's not be too hopeful. I was in Georgia and Israel for the defeats there, so I'm afraid I have no positivity. Thankfully, I missed off Kazakhstan, Callum, while you were blowing your cheeks out there. Thankfully, I didn't go there, but yes, I've been a few horror shows away from home, so yeah.
Although I think, given our recent optimism on the Aberdeen podcasts, I think we need to rein our levels of optimism in, Callum.
Yeah, we're going to lose. I'll say that, and I'll just hope for the best.
Yeah, reverse psychology. I like it. Fraser, you make a good point there, mentioning the likes of Tierney, Christie. Obviously, both those players missed the October international break due to being in close contact with Stuart Armstrong, who tested positive for COVID-19. Obviously a boost with having them back in the squad, but do you see them returning to the starting 11?
I see Tierney returning, yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately,
at the expense of Considine?
Unfortunately, I think it will be at the expense of Andy. Andy did nothing wrong last month, but you're not going to keep Kieran Tierney out for Andrew Considine, let's be fair. unfortunately, from a biased Aberdeen point of view. Christie, no, I can't see Christie coming straight into the team. I think Ryan Fraser did more than enough in the Nations League games last month to justify his place. Armstrong, I would like to start Armstrong instead of Callum McGregor, I'll be honest with you. I'm not a McGregor fan, but I know that Steve Clarke is a massive Callum McGregor fan, so I think Christie and Armstrong will be in the squad on the bench. And I think KT, unfortunately, from an Aberdeen point of view, fortunately from a Scotland point of view, will start. Unless, of course, he gets his usual weekend mystery injury, which, of course, there's every chance of that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of reluctantly agree with you on the Tierney point, even though I've not really seen us perform well with both Tierney and Robertson in the squad, but you can't be leaving your best players on the bench for a game of such high importance. But Callum, there's another area of defence that's probably up for question with the return of Scott McKenna to the squad, another former Aberdeen player. Obviously, we've seen you're disappointed there at Fraser explaining Considine will likely miss out. Do you fear that Scott McKenna will also miss out over and Declan Gallagher retain his place in the starting 11?
Yeah, I think Declan Gallagher proved to be very, very solid at the back of the 3 games. And Scott McKenna, he does have his critics, and he does. Sometimes I do feel just a bit nervous watching him, especially in a Scotland shirt. I felt a bit more confident in Aberdeen top. It wouldn't surprise me if Gallagher kept his place, to be honest. I think obviously McTominay and Tierney will be the other side of him. So I think Gallagher should keep his place, to be honest. It wouldn't surprise me. What about you?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, and I don't know, Fraser, if you tend to agree. I think he fully deserves to keep his place, but I suppose that there'll be people tuning into this episode, maybe even shouting for Liam Cooper to fill in as the middle of the back 3 if that's the formation we choose. And, it's quite refreshing to have those 3 options where I suppose we've even got Grant Hanley thrown into the squad as well.
Honestly,
let's not go too far.
I feel like I'm in 2016 again with Grant Hanley, Craig Gordon and Lee Griffiths in there, but here we are.
But I think, Fraser, we've mentioned a back 3. Is that do you think that's what we'll go with against Serbia?
100%. There's no chance we're changing to 4. Why would we? After the results last month, there is not a chance we will change to 4. In terms of the centre option, yeah, I think Gallagher should retain his place over McKenna, but Cooper will come into the equation given the level he plays at.
Although I suppose in relation to Cooper, sorry to interrupt you there, I suppose he only just returned from injury, was it on Monday night against Leicester? So, he's not had as much match fitness compared to the likes of Declan Gallagher. So it'll be interesting to see if it's in there. But would you be happy keeping McTominay at the right side? I suppose something me and Callum have touched on in recent podcasts is continuity and keeping a winning squad and how important that is. So based on that, would you be happy to see McTominay continue at the right side of defence?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, it was one where we were all sitting in September going, what on earth is Clarke doing? But I think we saw last month why he played McTominay there. Not only does he have the defensive aspects, but he also has that aspect of the Chris Wilder overlapping centre half that steps out. But yeah, no, I think McTominay stays there. I think you'll keep Gallagher there. I think Robertson will come back in at left wing back. Marshall will obviously probably keep his place in goals. And I think that's that continuity that then would allow you to bring Tierney in. And then right wing back, yeah, it's a toss-up between Palmer and O'Donnell. They both have done pretty well on their recent international appearances. I probably lean towards Palmer myself, but I would have no complaints if SOD kept his place given his performances last month. You only need to look at the goal he created for Ryan Fraser against the Czech Republic to show the value that he has as well. So
was it not his ball in for Dykes against?
It was, yeah. And then if you remember last month for Dykes' goal in the Czech Republic, it's Palmer's ball in from right wing back as well. So it's actually, for once, we've got a right wing back battle. And we've not had a right back since, allegedly Alan Hutton, but let's not go there either. So I think, continuity is key at the back, and I think Clarke will make minimal changes.
Yeah, so if we're looking at minimal changes, I take it you're happy with the midfield staying as as is McGregor then sitting. Lyndon Dykes has proved that he fits into international level with relative ease, scoring a couple already on the international stage. Are you happy for him as a lone striker with Ryan Fraser playing off of him? And obviously, if needed, we've got the likes of Lee Griffiths sitting waiting in reserve. It's great to see him back in the squad.
Yeah, I think Lyndon Dykes has proved himself at top level. I was a bit sceptical about him, to be fair. Obviously, he did well at Livingston, but you wonder how he's going to do in England, let alone on an international scene. And he seems to just be cruising it in both aspects. So very happy with Lyndon Dykes. And I thought Ryan Fraser up alongside him worked very well. Sort of your typical big man, little man, a bit of a throwback there. And it definitely worked. And you make a good point about Lee Griffiths. I was saying it to my dad earlier. If you've got Dykes on battering their defence for sort of 70 minutes, and then you can bring on Lee Griffiths, clinical poacher for 20 minutes to go when you need a chance and their defence maybe a bit got a bit tired legs, then I think that's not a bad option to have. And then I suppose you've still got Shankland, etc. as well.
I suppose that's the kind of role Griffiths has been performing for Celtic so far this season, and Fraser, Griffiths has provided many a good memory for Scotland fans so far in his career, and it'd be just kind of fairy tale stuff if he could come on and add to that in Serbia.
Yeah, and I think we saw in Clarke's presser yesterday that he is very much going to be coming off the bench for Lyndon Dykes. I mean, some of the goals that Griffiths has scored over both his Celtic career, his Hibs career and his Scotland career, they're finishes that he could produce out of the strikers that Scotland have just now. My mind drifts back to the slightly failed attempt to get the playoff in Slovenia, the 2-2 draw, where his opening goal cuts the ball right across Jan Oblak, and no other striker in our squad could produce a finish like that. So I'm in full agreement. I think he comes on after 65, 70 minutes. I could see him even coming on for Fraser and going up top with Dykes, particularly if we're chasing the game. So yeah, no, it's great to see him back, particularly after the issues that he's been through, very well documented. But obviously, as much as he's a pain in the backside in a Celtic shirt, as a national team fan, he's the sort of instinctive finisher you want. And obviously, okay, he's only scored 4 goals for the national team so far, but 2 of them were extremely high profile, as we know. And his finish in Slovenia was top drawer as well, so very positive.
Yeah, and I think what you said there about his instinctiveness and his ability to finish these chances that you don't expect, and he showed that for Celtic even recently, just against Aberdeen, with his finish in the 3-3 draw. There is quality there. It just needs to be brought out, and hopefully he does that against Serbia. But you've given away some great tactical insights, so hopefully we don't have any Serbian listeners that are then going to pass that on.
It's all right. Scotland are mints. You don't need to worry about us.
I suppose we should look into the Serbian side. Callum, I'll pass over to you since you did some excellent pronunciations so far. Where do you see some of the Serbian threats coming from?
You're teaming me up to absolutely butcher some of these names now.
Love it.
Obviously I mentioned Milinkovic-Savic. He's probably the best of the lot. Absolute game winner. I saw him against Norway coming up with the chip finish that he was just so composed and cool, calm, collected. They've also got a few others in there. Mitrovic being a former Newcastle player, and I quite like Newcastle, and that might prove just to be a bit more heartache if he scores the winner. And then Filip Kostic as well, ex-Groningen man, famously said they were 8% through, only for us to knock them out, but he's gone on and been an actual good player and not just a mouthy little turd. So that's probably my 3 main highlights. And there's obviously guys like Matic and things like that as well, who are just of a very good calibre.
Here's the point where I've done the sad research, Callum, because I can exclusively reveal that Filip Kostic has not scored for Serbia since the start of 2019. And he's not scored. So Kostic, although being a mouthy little so hasn't produced the goods. Their biggest threat absolutely is Alexander Mitrovic. From the start of 2019 until now, he has got 12 of the Serbians' goals. And the next highest scorer is Sergei Milinkovic-Savic with 3, 2 of which were against Norway. So it's very clear in my mind that the biggest threat in terms of goals is Mitrovic, and behind him Milinkovic-Savic and Tadic are the next 2 top scorers, and obviously they're the men likely to produce the goods and to help Mitrovic out. So yeah, it shows what I do at 10 o'clock at night on a Monday night.
It would be.
Look at Serbian goal scorers.
I think it's interesting though as well. Tadic was claimed in the European media to have tested positive for COVID-19, yet featured heavily for Ajax last night in their 2-1 win. I think it was a goal and assist he got. So it just shows what sort of threat that he can pose to the Scotland side. And obviously they've got Jovic up front as well, plays for Real Madrid. I think, Fraser, if you've still got your goal scorer stats there,
I
do.
Do.
He hasn't actually scored.
Luka Jovic has got 1 goal since the start of 2019 for Serbia. No, that is all right. Yeah, their goals aren't very widespread, if I'm honest with you.
No, they're not. But in looking back at some of their fixtures, they don't produce many 0-0s. They do have goals. They do have quality in them, but they're also susceptible to conceding. There's a big word for you since you've tried, and I failed miserably at trying to get it out.
They're very susceptible. Since the start of 2019, they've played 13 games overall. They've lost 24 goals, and at home, they've played 6 games since the start of 2019, and they've lost 10 goals. So, although they do score goals going forward, they've got 11 goals in 6 home games. They're very leaky at the back as well, which is absolutely the opposite of how Steve Clarke wants the game to go. So they are there to be gotten at, but they do carry a significant threat.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how Scotland managed to exploit that, given the way we're likely to set up. But do you think, Fraser, it'll be kind of a case of we sit in and hit Serbia on the break where possible, just try and soak up some early pressure?
I think to a point, yes. I think we saw against the Czechs and the Slovaks last month in particular that we won't be scared at times to get ourselves pressing high up the pitch and trying to force errors. And given the goals a conceded column that I've just read out, because I'm a bit sad like that, there are mistakes to be exploited. So I think we will sit back to an extent, but I don't think it'll be one of these backs to the walls and hope we nick a goal circa Fadi in Paris 2007 type displays.
Yeah, but Callum, I suppose, nicking goal on the counter, we're kind of blessed with a bit of pace in the team in the wide areas. Andy Robertson at wing back, Stephen O'Donnell or Palmer to a certain extent. But if Ryan Fraser starts, that's a great amount of pace up top to feed off flick-ons from Lyndon Dykes, and we all know the engine John McGinn's got. So there's certainly positives throughout that Scotland team to drive at the Serbian backline, and as Fraser's already indicated, they're a leaky backline.
Definitely, and since I'm a little Newcastle nerd, obviously Ryan Fraser's come in and he's played a few more league games as well since the last international break, which is obviously better for him on club level, but also international level. He'll be way more up to speed than he was. He was basically, that was some of his first starts other than in the Carabao Cup where with international games. So hopefully he'll be a bit more sharp and ready to go. His pace in behind especially from Dykes flick-ons could be absolutely horrifying for Serbians, and I'm hoping that's going to be the case. But I'm sceptical. But also, since you've mentioned Filip Kostic has not scored a goal, and that's all I can think about. I'm sorry. The fact that he's going to absolutely break our hearts finally this time and ruin everything.
But I think the point you make about Ryan Fraser there is a good one, that he's now got some more match fitness and match sharpness under his belt, because he put in 2 man of the match performances, arguably, in the Nations League games. And like you say, Callum, that's without having a proper game for Newcastle, a few sub appearances and Carabao Cup games. So encouraging signs in the build-up.
LOL! Pain.
So hopefully, I think hopefully we've built up some level of cautious optimism for you tuning into this episode ahead of the Serbia game. Just briefly though, as we like to do in our club football podcasts, we do a one-word feeling on the game because we don't like to put predictions on these games anymore. So Callum, we'll start with you. Give Fraser some time to think of his one word.
I think I have been. Sorry, I think I have been influenced by the Philip Kostic stat, and I'm going to go with worried as my one word, just in case it all goes wrong and we fail miserably once again. Glorious failure. What about
Fraser?
yourself?
Nervous, very nervous, definitely. And thanks, Callum. Yeah, now I've got Kostic scoring a goal and telling us how they're 100% through.
Wouldn't surprise me, honestly. Glenn, what about yours?
I'll say anxious.
Well, we've all gone very negative.
Well, I'd say anxious because there's obviously to a degree what Fraser's touched on there, nerves coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But as probably when I wake up on Thursday morning, I'll be so hopeful and I'll be face painting, kill on, dancing around the house. I'm off all day, so that day is going to drag. By far anything, I'll be messaging Sean Neville all my Scotland songs like we normally do on match day since we won't be able to be there. But, come kick-off, it'll be a different story. I'll be back hiding behind the cushion waiting to see how the game pans out.
Let's remember that if we don't win that game, all is not lost, because if we finish top of the Nations League group, and I'm going to thank Gordon Shiach of the tartanscarf.com for letting me plagiarise his work. Thank you, Gordon, for that. If we don't win that game, but we win one of our 2 Nations League games, then we get ourselves top of the league, promoted to League A. In terms of the next World Cup, that would mean we were highly likely for a playoff for the next World Cup in Qatar, as only Nations League group winners will be eligible for the playoffs. So there's only 4 groups in Group A in League A. So only 4 teams there can get a playoff. And of course, they're likely to qualify because they're big teams. So there's a highly likely chance that we'll get a playoff for World Cup 2022, and for Euro 2024 qualifying, we would be seeded in pot 2, which would be our highest seeding in a long time. It would make life a lot easier in the actual qualifiers, but more importantly than that, it's pretty much a guaranteed playoff. We've seen for this current Euros that the League A playoff route had 1 League A team in it, which is Iceland. The rest were absolute dross from the Nations League, League C, although Hungary have then proven themselves in the last year to be quite a decent team, also beating Serbia away from home. So all is not lost if we do lose it. The Nations League games are important. And once again, thanks to Gordon Shiach from the tartanscarf.com for letting me use his work there.
Thanks, Fraser, for making those points from Gordon there. And to follow his work, you can follow his Twitter page at the Tartan Scarf. He's provided some great content in the build-up to the Serbia game, including a trip down memory lane, reflecting the highs and lows since we last qualified for France '98. And there is some good throwbacks in there. Maybe some memories you don't want to remember.
Where were the highs? I suppose beating the Netherlands, maybe the France wins. Apart from that, it's been pretty barren.
Well, there's some good memories of some trips away that you might have enjoyed. Maybe not for you, Fraser, with your trips to Israel and Georgia.
John Peterson putting us 2-0 down in the Faroes and then turning out to be a school teacher. It's probably the highlight of our banter years, 2002, Callum, before you wouldn't even remember it.
Yeah.
But I distinctly remember my mum swearing at that game as it went on, as she was standing doing her ironing on a Saturday afternoon.
So that takes us nicely into the Nations League games, which, Fraser, you've already referenced in the build-up to this. So after hopefully qualifying for a major tournament, we have the option to guarantee ourselves almost a fallback if we fail at qualifying for Qatar in 2022, as you so eloquently described in the build-up to this link. Lyndon Dykes is suspended for the first game. Would you expect to see Lee Griffiths start that game, Fraser?
I could see him starting. I could equally see everyone's quote-unquote favourite Rangers supporting striker, Ollie McBurney, starting. I think it'll be horses for courses, depending on who's looking sharper in training, if I'm honest with you. But of course, Serbia comes with its own very distinct changes from the last time we played them.
Also, given the nature of the game on Thursday, do you think if we get a positive result, you could see wholesale changes, or do you think Steve Clarke will just say, right, one job's done, on to the next?
I think we'll see changes in the centre of midfield like he did last month.
Mhm.
But apart from that, I don't see any wholesale changes. I think he will see Slovakia as a major chance to win that group. Um, I mean, I certainly don't want to be going to Israel needing to win after last time, that's for sure. But obviously, you'll see the Slovaks in a wee bit of turmoil just now, having sacked their coach since the last round. They've got a caretaker in. And they also have their very big playoff, of course, next Thursday against Northern Ireland over in Belfast. So if Ian Barclough can somehow take them 120 minutes and not roll over, that would be excellent.
And Slovakia still missing Martin Dubravka, Newcastle's goalkeeper, because he's still injured. So there you go. My Newcastle knowledge is coming in really handy just now.
It really is.
But Callum, we've spoken in the past about how hopefully a team going to 120 minutes and so on would be a benefit, and seeing how that spectacularly backfired. But as Fraser touches on there, regardless of the result on Thursday night against Serbia, we really want to be getting the job done in the group against Slovakia. We don't want to be taking it to Israel.
Yeah, definitely. We know, watching Scotland, when it goes to the last game, it always ends disastrously. And I think going off the last international break, the confidence of, like, first they won the semi-final and then went on to get 2 good results. I think the confidence that builds from not only just the fact they've won, but also they know, like, okay, keep the focus and keep this going, then hopefully it'll just carry on to the next international break. That's my hopes. Very hopeful. But if they could do the same again, I'd be very happy.
Yeah, and I suppose we've also got that kind of dangling carrot in this international break of seeing a whole calendar year unbeaten on the international stage, Fraser, which I suppose you could also use as motivation.
To a point, I don't think they'll really care if they win the playoff and then they win in Slovakia. I think the game in Israel will then become a fringe player exercise. But it would be nice to go a calendar year unbeaten. It just depends what happens in Slovakia. Slovakia, we do have a good chance in terms of their home form. It's a bit patchy. They've played 7 games since the start of 2019. They've won 3, but they've also lost 3, and they've conceded more goals than they've scored at home. So they're there to be gotten at in Slovakia, which is a bit of a change from 4 years ago when me and Glenn rather drunkenly suffered the ignominy of a 3-0 defeat and the Slovakian announcer screaming Robert Mack's name a million times.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I suppose that'll be kind of haunting for those of us that travelled there, and many a Scotland fan.
It's even the same stadium.
It was kind of signalling of the end of the Gordon Strachan era. That was really the real turning point I felt in that campaign. So, it'd be quite nice for us to banish that memory by qualifying, securing top spot in the group, and then I suppose qualifying is the right word for Group A with a victory there in Slovakia, and let's hope that we can do that. But I do feel that the game against Slovakia, how that goes, hinges. Do you think, Callum, on how the Serbia game goes, whether we're deflated or traveling there on the high of qualifying for the Euros?
I think obviously confidence could take a massive, massive beating if we, for example, especially if we go out and get absolutely papped by Serbia. But if any sort of decent performance, whether it results in a win or not, might be okay. And the way that, as mentioned in the last international break as well, the way Clarke managed to keep the focus also might help as well. So even if we do lose, they might be able to use that as fuel and say, okay, you don't want to feel like that again, do you? So on you go and get at them. Which hopefully is the way it will work. And I think Steve Clarke, going by the last international breaks, type of man who can get that out of them. So that's what I'm hopeful of.
Yeah, and I think what you've just touched on there, Callum's a kind of good point there about the focus. And I suppose, Fraser, having 3 away games coming up, okay, not great in terms of travelling, but it should allow the squad to focus, and there shouldn't be many distractions of the home game. And the players won't see the media overreaction and whatnot from certain results. So hopefully that does allow a sense of focus to be kept in the camp.
I certainly hope so. I mean, we're all big fans of how the press absolutely hound us when things go wrong. But I think being away from home will suit us, particularly if things go wrong in Serbia. We can go to Slovakia and not pay too much attention to the Red Tops, which will be a nice change.
And I think I'm right in saying as well, for that game, is Andy Robertson not suspended as well?
No, he missed the Czech Republic game through suspension. He rather stupidly and sensibly, in the same vein, got a booking for kicking the ball away against the Slovaks at home.
Yes, that's right.
And missed the Czech game, and Greg Taylor came in and did perfectly fine. And
Yes.
everything went well till we took Paul Hanlon on. But thankfully, there's no highbees near this squad.
So far, I suppose.
Aye.
At the time of recording, there's currently no highbees in the squad. There is obviously still chance, and I suspect a few of them will be on standby. And looking at the likes of Kevin Nisbet, who I think could feel slightly aggrieved to not be included in the squad up front.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that. I mentioned it in the podcast with Michael previewing the Hibs game. He's done more than Shanklin in the Premier, and it's at the same level, and he's on better form and things, and yet Shanklin's involved, he's not. So I presume he would be the first man in line should there be any call-offs. But at the same point, there is a few in there. So I don't know whether striker is one of the positions they might just, if a player drops out, they might just sort of allow it and not bring anyone up. But another one's Callum Patterson. I don't know what he is. He just confuses me, that man. I can't tell whether he's a winger or a striker or a midfielder or a defender. He's just an enigma.
He's Dr. Funk, that's what he is.
Yeah, he's just Mr. Utility Man.
He is the Derek Young of Scotland. And of course, we all remember Derek Young, good to have around the place.
Yeah, that's true.
I suppose it's good having a player like Callum Patterson in the sense that he can fill in a couple of positions if needed. And obviously, with the squad that's been named for this upcoming international period, Clarke's gone for an experienced squad. He's come out and said that with the likes of Craig Gordon and Grant Hanley. He's picked them based on experience. We've also gone for a sizable squad, and again, he's quoted to be saying that's down to the travel and the demand on the players. Given the importance of these games, it's good to be taking a large squad so that players are already in and around the squad if they need to be called upon. And I think that's a really sensible approach from Steve Clarke, and it's refreshing to see. There's been a bit of forward thinking there from him.
I know, forward thinking for a Scotland manager. Who'd have ever thunk it? But I was looking at the Serbia squad as well. They've gone huge as well. They've got 4 goalkeepers in their squad. And about 1 million midfielders. It's actually right in front of me now. I don't even want to count it. It looks like there's about 15 midfielders in there for them. They've gone big as well. So it makes sense, with especially having 3 games international break for once, but with all the travelling as well. It's just smart thinking, and as I said, from a Scotland manager, that's unlike them.
There was a recommendation from UEFA that squad sizes were increased for this break after the problems we saw in the last 2 breaks. So it's nice to see that Steve Clarke has taken that recommendation on board. And hopefully we won't end up in a situation where we're looking to the bench and seeing players like Paul McGinn on it.
Well, also touch wood, we don't see ourselves in a situation like we did in the last break and have players affected by COVID that then kind of throws the preparations into disarray at the last minute. We're hopeful, given for all the games coming up, they've got huge importance in various respects. We hope it is a smooth and plain sailing build up, but we know with Scotland that's never the case. And like you've already touched on there, Fraser earlier, we hope the players all make it through this weekend injury and COVID free, I suppose we should now say. As we've touched on, it's a huge 3 games coming up for Scotland that really will kind of define the national team, I suppose, to an extent. And possibly, do you think, Fraser, this is going to be a defining break for Steve Clarke's reign?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it should be. I think that I'm perhaps a wee bit soft here, but I think he should kind of, even if we lose to Serbia, still be given time. Chopping and changing has done us absolutely no good. He looks a reasonable manager, but I think public perception does basically hinge on the Serbia game, unfortunately for him. But if he wins, and he gets through, he's going to be an absolute national hero. So he's got to look at the positive and try and make that happen.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we're not advocating for managers to be losing their jobs. It's just a kind of thought that crept into my head about how crucial this game is for the national teams. And I do tend to agree, Callum. I'm not sure if you're on the same wavelength as well, that if, worst case scenario, we do fail against Serbia, I think Clarke should be given the World Cup qualifying at least to try and rectify that, especially if we then, guarantee a playoff again from the Nations League.
Yeah, I definitely agree because, obviously there's still the two important games after that. And so we could have a playoff even after this one goes kaput. But also another thing, I was just thinking, who else is there that's going to do any better? There's not really many options out there, is it? Messers McGuinness, maybe?
No, thanks. Not for Scotland. I think Fraser's already made that perfectly clear. But I think, we've got to remain positive and we've got to remain upbeat. It comes kind of double-edged. There's always cautious optimism around Scotland, but like I said, come Thursday, everyone will be up and believing for the game, and hopefully the squad have also got that self-belief. Andy Robertson has spoke positively in the press, and there does seem to be, Fraser, I think, a lot of belief and confidence in the camp that they can do something as a squad. Like we touched on at the start, the style's not great, but we're getting the results, and there's maybe a little bit of swagger coming into the team.
That Israel game, particularly the penalty shootout, was the turning point in terms of confidence for this squad. I think we saw in September how absolutely fragile they were, and the fact that they stood up to Israel, stood up to the penalty shootout and the pressure of that, and not only that, but scored all 5 penalties. I think it was a massive turning point, and you saw the way that we performed against Slovakia and the Czech Republic on the back of the confidence that we gained there. I wouldn't say there was a swagger. I mean, swagger, apart from Kenny McLean's swagger up to take the penalty against Israel, I wouldn't say there was much swagger in the squad, but there's a bit of confidence. I think, touching on what Callum said earlier about Lyndon Dykes, he's got a bit of that arrogance and confidence that comes from his bringing up in Australia, and I like that. We've missed that in a striker for so long. So yeah, confidence, swagger, no, not for me.
Just needs to channel that aggression a little bit, though. We saw some of that indiscipline, possibly. Lucky to stay on the pitch in that last game against the Czechs.
Yes, but if he uses it in the right way, as he did against Slovakia and Israel, what an asset he is.
Yeah, it's definitely good to actually have a shithouse who can actually play as well. That's a bonus.
Yes.
I've got that in Lyndon Dykes, I think.
And Ollie McBurney proved to do that as well when he came on to run down the clock.
That was possibly my favourite moment of the last international break. The utter joy he took when he won that 17th throw-in in a row was just fantastic.
I loved it.
Yeah, and it's a lad who, having listened to the official Scotland podcast at the start of the last international break, had felt a bit nervous and a bit sort of worried about, being there with the national team. And I think we saw the confidence that, being involved in the Israel game, and then, as Callum said, that wonderful display of knocking the ball off Slovaks for throw-ins and corners brought.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And once he gets the first goal as well, hopefully confidence will be flowing.
Of course, and he was exceptionally unlucky a couple of times in that last break, particularly the shot that he took absolutely out of nowhere and struck the bar against the Czechs. How unlucky can you get?
Definitely.
Well, I think we've done our best to hopefully galvanise those listening and get you in the mood for the big game on Thursday, whilst also looking ahead to the important Nations League game. There aren't just glamour friendlies like many suspect. But, we've done our one-word feeling on the game. I'm going to put you both on the spot.
Oh, no.
Do we qualify for the Euros? Yes or no?
Going how much I've jinxed things in the past, I'm going to say no, and just hope that I'm wrong. That's the only thing I could take from this. Fraser?
Yeah, I always tend to the negative, so I'm going to say no, but I'm going to say that then we will qualify for League A of the Nations League. So I've gone negative, but I've given a wee bit of positive at the end as well. So yeah, I would say no, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
I don't know about yourself, Glenn.
We're doing it. We're qualifying for the Euros.
Oh,
We're
here we
qualifying
go.
to League A. Steve Clarke,
We're
Andy
winning it all.
Considine, they are taking us to the Euros.
John Carver, don't forget him.
Yes, your important stat. We forgot to include that, unbeaten under John Carver's coaching.
Exactly. He didn't say he's the best coach in the Premier League for nothing, all right?
And Declan Gallagher, 5 games, no defeats.
True.
Not that he
Very, very
mentions
true.
it. Not that Steve Clarke mentions that Declan Gallagher mentions it after every game.
Well, there you go. There's a nice positive spin to end the podcast on. Fraser, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And all that's left to be said is, come on, Scotland.